and we should be good to go.
Awesome, man.
Hello, everyone, again. Welcome to the Rocket On Productions podcast. How y'all doing? Okay, awesome.
Your intros, man. Your intros are
Dude,
spot on.
I am so charismatic you don't even know. All right.
Yeah, dude. hmm
Okay.
Okay, so my name's Matt, and I have some ranting to do about a game I'm playing, and I think that would be an interesting. Just as a side note, I think that'd be a pretty interesting topic. It's like what we're playing. Um, so I'm about knee deep in my most recent campaign in Total War Warhammer 2, which is a great PC game. One of the greatest, maybe, given how much time I've put into this freaking thing. So Greer, if you remember from our last discussion,
Yeah.
I am playing a campaign in Mortal Empires as the Skaven, who are kind of like the Ratmen race, and my legendary lord's name is Ekit Claw.
It's
And
pretty badass.
right, the most important thing you can know about Ekit Claw is he's the Ratman version of Napoleon in this fantasy cataclysm that we call a Warhammer campaign. And I am absolutely living Napoleon's true destiny of conquering the known world as a rat. It's like I'm having so much fun. Okay, so let me just hit you with some deets, right?
Well, it's like starting from the
I've
bottom. Now we're here, pretty much, at this point.
yeah, right. So like the reason I love Ikit Claw so much is because and the reason I love the game generally is because there's just so much depth and variety and nuance to every single character, and like it's a smart way to build a campaign around kind of a Sid Meier's Civilization style map where you go and you can kind of do diplomacy or but at the same time, let's be honest, it's called Warhammer.
It's also called
You're supposed
Total
to be
War. So,
yeah, I know, right? Total War Warhammer, which sounds redundant if you don't know what I'm talking about. But
yeah.
so yeah, so but Iki Claw, as a member of the Skaven faction and as a specific member of this faction, is the artillery expert extraordinaire, the warlock master, the warlock engineer, right? That's like his like little job. So I have conquered about half of the first world continent that I started on. And what that really means is I have wiped out approximately 80 to 85% of all human life on this continent.
Well, that's
So the only
impressive.
factions that are still alive. So Skavenblight, which is my home base where I start. Right, that's Ikit Claw's starting position. It's kind of the mecca, the Vatican of Skaven life. All tunnels lead back to Skavenblight.
So,
After
so
all,
it's the big cheese. Is what you're telling me.
it's yeah. Oh my God, solid one, man. Great addition,
Yeah.
Greer. Yes, it
All
is 1,000% the big cheese.
all your quality comedy needs. All of them.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Dude. Yeah. Oh my God, nailed it right there.
Yeah.
So Skavenblade is kind of, if you can imagine, it's a really ham-fisted uh, allegory for Europe. Like they didn't even try on some of these factions. Like Tilea is Italy, and Estalia is Spain, and Britonia is France, and all of these countries surround Skavenblade. But so since I updated you last time,
Yep.
I have officially murdered all of Talea, all of Estalia, and just about all of Britonia. I don't think there's any Britonians left. I think that faction was
So
destroyed.
you're telling me you're essentially ruining someone on Vermintide's day right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
dude, I am.
Yeah.
I am 100% stomping through the faces of human factions galore. But I've since moved west because the humans are getting boring. I want to mess with those pretentious, narcissistic assholes that are the elves, those elitist cucks who say that no rat people can live prosperously on the on the surface world. It is part of the Skaven religion, which I am now wholly a part of. But so anyway, I get to the west, right? I'm invading the Elven lands, and they've been prodding and kind of harassing me with armies coming across the ocean because they have a good navy and they don't get any attrition from the ocean, which my poor rat bastards do because they're they're
Wait.
so pestilent. My
Elves have a good navy?
like Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in this, not like, I mean, because it doesn't really work like the way a navy would. It's like if you, it's just that they don't get any attrition from crossing the ocean. Whereas
Okay.
because my rats are so pestilent and corrosive and diabolical, they give each other all these diseases and they just fester on these boats for too long. Like, which I think is a hilarious kind of cliche about like rats at sea,
Dude, just
like
call
a
your ship.
rat on a raft.
Just call your ship the Black Plague.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so I come across and I'm trying to build an anchor hold, like a strong point in the Elven region, so that I can expand my empire because I have a chip on my shoulder. Everybody thinks that rats aren't up to par, but in fact, I think that my version of Icky Claw is the most intellectually superior rat conquering overlord, and they're gonna learn. Don't worry. Like, come like turn 300, I'll have continents under my belt, son. But
What
I
turn?
get
What turn
across
are you on now?
65. So I've
Oh,
got plenty of time, dude. And I am absolutely slaying this thing. And the problem is too, part of the reason the campaign is so hard to finish in Total War is because, the bigger you get, the more decisions each turn takes. Like you have that many more. I mean, I have dozens of armies. Isn't that hard to believe? I literally have
dude,
dozens.
when we played, I had 3 armories, and I was having a hell of a time going like, I don't even know what's happening right now. Oh, I have some dude stuck in the desert. I gotta get him out
Yeah,
there.
right, dude.
Like,
Yeah, and you can literally forget to give guys instructions and orders, on a whole turn. So you have to be really thorough about it. And I notice it just becomes like cyclical. You kind of get lost in what turn it is and where your guys are. But anyway, so I know what my general mission is, and now I'm being really specific about it. I'm in Elfland, in Elf territory, right? And Tor Everus, I think is what it's called, is kind of like the provincial capital for the Safiri. I think that's, and I don't know the lore all that well, but I think that's who I'm talking about because they're all like it's Averlorn and Safiri and a couple of these other like elven city states, if that makes sense, are
gotcha.
all allied against me because the elves obviously have great relationships with each other and terrible relationships with every other race. I am their mortal enemy for obvious reasons.
Oh man,
Uh,
that does not reminds me of like when I was in the chivalrous knights of Bretonia. I attacked
yeah,
every other human city. My
yeah,
chivalry was like negative 200. Like,
yeah,
what is
yeah.
wrong with you?
Well, yeah, you got that's the worst part about playing all the humans and the elves and like the highbrow people is because you have to have like you got to be a boy scout about it. You got to be polite and chivalrous and stuff. Whereas like I get offended if you reject a trade agreement with me. I'm like, all right, to the sword. Like courtesy, honor among thieves.
Yeah, that's how it happens
So
in real life, right?
exactly right, right. So anyway, so I get to the Elven continent. I'm concerned because there's a ton of armies around, and like if they wanted to, and we're playing it a little smarter, they probably could have smashed each because I have to send them in waves essentially, right? And honestly, this reminds me. This is basically the Trojan War. It's beautiful. I'm sending like ship after ship, but the problem is like they're all staggered. I can't get them all to go in this at the same time. Like I send one army, and then I'm building another, and then when that guy's ready, I send him. But it's like I'm sending them one at a time, and and basically they could mount a defense if they wanted to. So I bite off a little bit more than I can chew trying to build a strong point in Elf continent, right? So I've got this small settlement that I've attacked and I've destroyed their army, but my army's taken a lot of hits. And so then I have two or three more armies, and I've surrounded one of their provincial capitals. But if you remember anything about Warhammer, like Total War, it's the provincial capital is very well defended.
Oh yeah.
You have the siege towers, the siege works that you have to. Usually, you want to build at least a ram, maybe a couple towers, depending on what your stack looks like. So based on the battle balance, which tells you essentially how your army is going to stack compared to theirs. So they have a settlement garrison, which is a whole stack, and then they have the actual army that's garrisoned at this place. So they have essentially two armies um, defending, plus the walls and the sentry turrets that do a devastating amount of damage to any infantry. If I don't have siege towers, or if I don't have a ram or large enemies to bust down the doors, so I'm a little nervous, right? Because I could gamble on the siege, but you never know. Like you're much more likely to lose a siege in the auto resolve than anything else because I don't know, just a weird kind of computation thing. So I hold them out, and basically I'm just having this kind of weird dance with the armies around, where it's like I'm trying to get them to attack me in the field, which can happen, right? So they can initiate the attack if I besiege the provincial capital, and then we fight the battle as just a typical land battle between the two armies
Gotcha.
that are in the
So
area. If that
essentially, you're just standing outside their walls, throwing as much shade as you can until you piss them off enough to like move
right,
outside.
and these snooty upper lip elven pretentious nerds, I'm trying to get them, but they don't want to come out because that's not a smart idea. And you know what? Fine, like don't do it. But essentially, I find myself in this predicament where two other elven armies who are allied with these guys start approaching. Right, so I've got the armies I know I have to deal with in the provincial capital, but now I see two other armies that are obviously on the move, and what they're trying to do is rout me from the siege and get me out. And I see them coming, and I'm like, ah, man, I'm probably gonna have to deal with them. So it's kind of like that's the pivot point, the decision point with, and so one guy gets attacked by the two armies, like one of like my supporting army does. And I have a third army just literally right off the coast. I mean, it is so close. I literally thought that if I initiated the battle, I'd get those guys as reinforcements, because if you have armies that are close enough to each other, you can they can reinforce an army, and it's a cool effect and a fun way to do it. So, but unfortunately, because they're still in a boat and they're right off the coast, they're off the table until the next turn. I'm like, crap. That means they can fight a battle with either of these two armies and potentially win, and then it's just going to take me that much longer to, a couple more turns to establish the foothold that I wanted to do the first time, because I'm Napoleon, right? That is how I see this campaign. So anyway, I decide to pull one of the armies away, right? I want to, if I'm going to lose the battle, I want to sacrifice the reinforcing army on the provincial capital. So I send him to retreat away to try to draw the attention of the two armies that are approaching to help, right? And I want them to attack this guy. And these elven bastards fall right into my trap, Greer. They fall right into it.
Nice.
They come after this diversionary army, who's a. I mean, he's I think, and he's already been hit a couple times. I can't remember, like he had already fought a battle or something like that. So he's at about, he's at about 95% of his like fighting strength. So he's not bad, right? He can like handle himself. His units are okay, but they are not up to like full bars. And I have count them, two elven stacks that have now initiated a battle. But based on the balance of power, it looks like it's still about 50-50, because my stack is really strong. And he's got two full stacks of like Lothern Sea Guard and kind of, but not much in the way of cavalry. No artillery, because the elves don't have any good artillery. And like really the strong points of the elves are like they're dragons, large monsters, like they got their eagles, and then their cavalry.
That fantasy warfare, essentially.
Yeah, right. And then it's all cav and archery. Like that's kind of their bread and butter.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, similar to the way humans do, but just a little different. So anyway, without any of the artillery. Whereas I'm a pure artillery build. It's large
Cannons.
Artillery, and then as many of the vermin sensor bearers as I can manage. So okay, I'm really not confident though that I can win this, but so he's got two stacks who are coming in, and I've kind of figured out how to organize this. I put all my artillery. Really, what I realize is you want to group up a lot more than you think you do, especially if you're the artillery build and they're attacking you. You have all the defensive options that you could want. And so the first priority is to get everything, to try to find elevation, because you get a huge elevation boost in damage and a bunch of other like factors, variables. So I get all of my artillery in real close on the small little hill gradient that I can find in the back corner, because I've got two full stacks. So like basically he's got the one stack that's already there, that's postulating, and then his reinforcements are on the way, and it shows me in a little icon what direction his reinforcements are going to come. So luckily I have this little hill, and it's basically it's as far away as from the reinforcements position as you can be. And so usually with like a Zerg unit, with like a horde unit, faction anyway, what you want to be able to do is overrun as quickly as possible. So like with the first army already there, you'd want to send in as much as much fighting potential as possible to like to kind of cut through as many of the first army as you can, so that when the reinforcements get there, they're not like that's a relevant strategy for the horde. But what I realize is like I'm not a horde build, I'm an artillery build. So I let his like what the AI loves to do is when the reinforcements get there, they mesh the whole army together, right? So that it becomes one big army, and then they move forward because that's like and the AI is like not stupid. It's the best. It's your best chance, especially because like the other thing you can do is if you try to horde Zerg the first army, right, and kind of catch them by surprise before the reinforcements can get there. It's just another opportunity when you establish yourself in a vanguard where you can't move your infantry units and they can just flank, and the flank move is going to just crush you every time. So anyway, again, I'm one stack. He's got two stacks. I let him like I move. I'm way in the back of the box when I spawn, and I let him just organize all his stuff as he wants, and then he moves in mass towards me. But boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh man, dude, I have major buffs in my artillery reload speed, accuracy, and damage, and ammo count. Right, buffs in all of those because that's like my main skill buff in all of my legendary lords. I have big buffs in like the general sense for the rad ogres and the large monsters, the hell pit abomination, which are my two big large like kind of like that's essentially Skaven cavalry to me, right? They just brutalize, you
Largely
know,
charged shock troopers, pretty much.
right. And so what I find, dude, I have like just the perfect strategy for this. I have my rad ogres, my doom wheels, and my flares, right, which are kind of like the uh, cavalry as well, and my hell pit abominations all up front. I then have all my sensor bearers, like my kind of like the Zerg units or my phalanx units, the guys who are just supposed to be moving the battle in that direction. And then I have a couple like warp throwers and like globadiers, and more importantly are the snipers. The snipers are the best unit, dude. I'm pushing like 100 kills a game, 100 kills a battle with the snipers. Like you would not believe how good these things are.
Nice.
So literally, and they're literally right on top of each other. I mean, next to each other, and the snipers are right in front of the catapults, which are right in front of the lightning guns. And I've put as much distance as possible between the enemy armies that are now like building a massive super army to now push towards me and theoretically destroy me. So obviously the first thing that happens is I just am crushing them with artillery. So the catapults and the catapults and the cannons have major range, and so I'm just like going to pound town on all of the infantry units I can see in the beginning, and it's like especially the stuff that's going to establish a vanguard, right? Which is anyway. So that's happening in the beginning, and I have range buffs, so I can just shoot from millions of miles away, and collateral damage is super good because they're bunching up like a bunch of dipshits. Then what happens? Then my next move is that the very first thing happens is the doom flares, like the rat wheels, the doom wheels, and the rat ogres and the hell pit abomination all charge forward, right? And so what they're trying to do is catch any of the infantry guys, like the Lothar and Sea Guard or whatever, and basically just ruin. I'm just peppering them with these guys. Like they charge in, they ruin their charge bonus, like rob them of any momentum they have, and it just keeps them from like being able to attack all that suddenly. But then I shift the fire, right? So once the rat ogres get there, I move the artillery to the archers behind them, which the archers are going to be the most devastating part of the elves because they can just pepper you like the whole game and they never run out of ammo. And it's just really annoying. And they run away, they're in skirmish mode the whole time. So I shift fire with my artillery. Then the snipers are hitting basically whatever they can shoot at, mostly cavalry if there's any that are risky. And then I'm hitting the other bows, like, basically their counter fire. So they're shooting at anything that's shooting at me. Works like a charm, right? And the artillery is shifting that way too. So now all the bowmen who otherwise would be raining arrows into my horde are suppressed by my artillery because I'm awesome.
Nice.
then what I do is I send the rat ogres in the direction of the bow people. As my infantry units, my vanguard starts to push forward and meets in the center, right where they start to like have the battle. But then I'm hitting the center, the opposite of the center with my anti armor like warp throwers, which are like basically just armor piercing, and it gives armor piercing buffs to all my infantry. Again, smashing them into the ground, and then finally, the last thing is that Ikit Claw has some of the best spells in the game, and so it's just raining down warp lightning, and I have a Doom Rocket in my pocket, like which is their Skaven nuke, which I'm just waiting to hit if it looks like the battle's starting to go south. And I literally, I mean, dude, with one army, like with one single 20 stack army, I I think I lost in total 64 people. Like 64 good brave rats died.
All
And I
right.
cost them like 2,200 elves. It's like,
It's like, dude.
dude, I am Rat Napoleon, king of the world. It's awesome.
Nice.
Anyway,
It's like
that's
so different too,
that's my
because like
rant.
again, you're playing as a rat race, so you're like, man, I am the underdog at this point. So, like,
Well, I'm leaning
nobody
into it
really
because,
likes me. I'm evil.
dude, oh yeah, I'm scheming the whole time. I betray people all the time. But the funny thing is that all the evil races, like the vampires, the orcs, and the vampire coast is like a separate faction technically, but all of those guys, like all the allegorically evil races in the fantasy genre, are all just like root me on. Like the Beastmen, they love me. Like I have great relationships with all these guys. So like, yeah, dude, that guy's pro chaos, which is hilarious.
Pure chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what they're only like quote unquote chaos faction that has like technology like that. There's no other technologically advanced ones, right?
No, no. So technically, what do you call it? Norska and I guess Chaos have what are called what are they called? Like so they have Chaos Dwarves, right?
Okay.
That's like a sub faction, and the Chaos Dwarves have a dwarven Chaos artillery. I can't remember. It's there's a specific name for the type of cannon, but I can't remember.
Yeah,
It's
but it's
like
no lightning gun. Just,
yeah, right. Yeah, dude.
like, oh yeah, you shoot cannonballs. I shoot literal lightning at you. So
Dude, literally rattling gun teams that are shooting machine gun fire into the fray. It's like this is not even fair. Like you
it's like
guys.
the scene from Last Samurai where everyone's charging at once. It's just like
Yeah. That is exactly what it's like, and I love it. It's my favorite thing. Um, yeah. So that's been my that I just like I don't know, man. I just had battle after battle of really nail biting and like satisfying uh, drama. It was great. It was cool.
nice, dude. Yeah, well, that can go into our discussion today on player choice, because
Yeah.
I mean, like Warhammer, well, Total War in general, is like you have the setting, you have how it's set up already. However, you can choose who to play, how to play them, and where that campaign goes, or everything like that. I think like what Immortal Empires can go literally anywhere from
Oh
where you
yeah.
are, right?
Yeah. We had a. Oh, sorry. Continue.
Yeah, I think that kind of freedom, like in that game, just makes that game infinitely replayable, pretty much, because there's so many variables you can see that can happen that
Right.
like you essentially just start something new and experience something new every single time.
Yeah. Well, like I was trying to figure out what about the meta made it so replayable, right? Because like player choice I think is definitely a function of replayability. Like I just got through another play, or I'm about halfway, three-fourths of the way through another Witcher 3 playthrough. And part of what keeps it so fresh is I'm making a lot of decisions different to what I made the first time because I want to see how things play out. Like famously, one of the quests that I was completely blown away by was the Kira Metz one, where like I'd played a couple times. I'd started the game a couple times where I'd romance her, or I'd keep her alive, because you can do that. But there's so many opportunities for her to die. Whether either Geralt literally kills her by his hand, which is insane to me. I'm like that it felt evil. It felt so weird and wrong, given how she can totally survive unscathed in one playthrough, and then another one. Spoilers if you haven't seen what her end is in one of the options, right? One of the endings is really bad, where she gets literally crucified um, by the witch hunters. You know, these
Yeah.
evil kind of like anti or human nationalists. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, it's like just
or whatever.
pretty much anti everything except
Yeah, right.
science.
Yeah, right. So they're bigots and
If
extremists or whatever.
science
And
was more progressed, they'd probably be anti-science at this point. So
yeah, yeah, they're flat earthers. You know,
yeah, there you go. This is what happens when like
anti-vax.
flat earthers start ruling. It's like, oh
Yeah,
no.
exactly. Yeah, right. This is where we are. But yeah, so anyway, like, but I was trying to figure out why the meta is so awesome in Total War, and it's like I like the organization of the rat race because it does, it feels like a board game, and they try to make it like that, but essentially the end game is like you're preparing for the apocalypse. Like that the chaos gods eventually are coming around turn 300, and it's just about like trying to stay alive. And anyway, yeah, it's just a really cool.
Well, like think about that though. Like when you choose to play as a Skaven, you have a few options of what Skaven you want to play. However, no matter what,
Yeah,
you're a Skaven. The Skaven behave just like this, and I think that's like one of the ways where you know everyone loves to talk about freedom of player choice, but like sometimes restricting player choice in that aspect
yeah,
improves
yeah, dude.
gameplay. Like, can you imagine if like every single like faction in that game was exactly the same? Like you chose the Ratmen, and they had units that were equal and all in archery to the elves. So you can essentially just do rats as elves, and like there's no distinctive quality to either person. So when you run across the elves, maybe they have like, again, the same archers, so it's an archer versus archer battle. And I feel like
Yeah, dude.
that, like, in restricting certain like factors within the player choice, you promote more creativity and like variables that way.
Yeah,
Like I think in terms of gameplay choice, at least Mass Effect Andromeda like lets you switch between classes on the go, and that sounds great in theory. However, like if you ever talk about Mass Effect Andromeda with anyone in terms of gameplay systems like that, yes, the game is fun, and when you play it, it feels fun. However, everyone always describes the exact same thing whenever they go through a battle. Like, like what'd you do? Like, well, I dashed in, switched to this, shot him that way, blew him up this way with a grenade, and I moved on. Meanwhile, like you played Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3, you had a distinctive class. So if you were a soldier, like I brute forced my way through with gunfire, or for you were like
yeah,
biotic, like I lifted a dude off the ledge, threw him into another guy, hit him with another blast to set off a chain reaction that exploded this part of the section and knocked him off that way, or
yeah,
I snuck around the other way, that kind of thing. Like, and I feel like that restriction there, it's almost like what RPGs like. They're open ended in the choices you do with your character, but not how you make your character. When you make like player choice needs to have consequence. I think is the running theme there. Like when you make a decision, it actually has to have an effect. Having too much freedom
yeah,
within your choices just makes everything feel very blasé at times.
yeah. No, true.
And
Well, like having too many options. Somebody. It's like it's almost like about curating the experience. Like it feels like um, with the difference between The Witcher and Skyrim, for example,
yeah,
is like there's almost like more versatility with the mechanics of Skyrim. Uh, and like Zelda's another example where it's like it's so open ended and kind of systemic in the way that that's not necessarily bad, but like you're not going to get the same refined level of experience that you do in The Witcher 3 when they guide you, they handrail you on a quest to show you exactly what they're trying to tell you, but within like the loose parameters of the world. So the world of The Witcher is enormous, and yet when you're experiencing quests or side quests, it's very specific and refined to a particular moment. You have to like put on the right kind of clothes to go into the ball in The Witcher or something like that, and you're never going to see that kind of depth in like Zelda or something. But at the same time, you're not going to have the freedom in The Witcher that you have of Zelda, and it's like that give and take, which I have felt myself experiencing even coming off Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which I think is not as strong a game as The Witcher 3. I see like Novigrad and I'm like, man, I just wish I could just crawl up the building like in Assassin's Creed, or I
yeah.
wish I could Sekiro run my happy ass through this place. And so,
Well, again, like I
anyway,
think also just putting certain limitations on yourself when playing these games make the choices you make much more meaningful. Like I play Skyrim without using the fast travel system.
yeah, right,
People will
right,
call
right.
me insane, but again, I also have a lot of mods that just add events on the road that I experience as I'm walking along the thing. So Like
Yeah, dude.
when I pick up a quest and it tells me to walk literally all the way across Skyrim, I'm like, okay, we're gonna pin that in the wall and wait for the game to
Yeah.
do that one, or I'll take a carriage
Oh yeah.
because that's like the only fast travel I allow for myself is to take a carriage because it's realistic in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get on
Yeah.
this carriage and ride to a different town. That makes
Well,
sense.
I do kind of appreciate that with what do you call it? With the Witchers, because like you can only fast travel from signposts,
No, yeah, that
and
is
then
really
you can
nice.
only fast travel to other signposts you've been to before. So regardless, even if you fast travel, you still have a hike a lot of the time. And you know what I've actually been doing in The Witchers? Like I don't ride my horse. I only walk. If that makes sense.
I do
Uh,
that more often than not just because the horse controls leave something to be desired in
yeah,
most
right.
games.
I find myself just looking at the map the whole time. Whereas if I'm walking, and I make a point not to sprint because, like, I don't know about you, but when I was playing Breath of the Wild the first time, I caught myself sprinting everywhere. Right, just like basically just religiously tapping it,
Yeah,
trying to get to the next point. I'm like, okay, hold on. The whole point of this game is a stop and smell the roses kind of aesthetic. Maybe I should just like slow down,
yeah.
just try to take a breath. So I've been focusing on that a lot. And
Well, again, it's like I think the best RPG experience I've played in a while, gameplay wise, totally not story wise, is Dragon's Dogma.
oh yeah, dude.
Yeah, dude, like, people will freaking hate the fact that you only get one fast travel option with the crystal, where you can only put in one location, and then like the
Yeah,
more
yeah.
playthroughs you get, the more crystals you get, so you can like literally like by your fifth playthrough, you have 5 crystals set up in all the key locations. You can speed run the game in like 2 hours. But like
Oh god,
for me,
yeah.
the first playthrough is always the best, just because you only have one of those, and every quest you do has you hiking to a far off location, and but like the enemy layout and monster dynamic was so like, good there that like every travel was a journey. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't like Skyrim where you're walking across the road and maybe like a bandit will show up and be like, "Give me your money." It's like, dude, I literally just killed this dragon. No,
Yeah, dude.
instead it's like uh, you're walking in the night, you're in the woods. It's dark, like extremely dark. The lighting is great in that game. You have your lantern out. You can only see like 15 feet in front of your face, if even. You see 2 red dots in the forest. You peer closer to it. You look
Oh
closer,
yeah.
and a freaking
Oh, brutal.
chimera jumps
I
out of the
know,
woods
man.
and
I know,
mauls at you.
dude.
And you're like, "Oh God!"
Yeah,
Or
it
like
is.
you're escorting a merchant to a far off castle to deliver supplies. You're relatively safe most of the time. You run into a few goblins, but it's nothing you can't handle, especially from afar. Then you're
Yeah,
walking
yeah.
along the cliffside, and a cyclops shows up. It's like you fought cyclopses before; they're easy. You can take them out pretty quickly. Only problem is you've always fought them in open spaces, not a narrow cliff face.
Yeah,
And
dude.
like that just creates a whole new dynamic. You can't just take your merchant and teleport or fast travel to a different location with them. You have to face this obstacle, but you have many options in which to do so depending on your class and choices and everything like that. And that's why like player choices need to have impact and also just variety. But at the same time like not everything. It can't be the Mass Effect 3 situation. Like with no matter what variables you chose, you always get the same 3 endings no matter what. That's like
Yeah.
the worst because Mass Effect was doing great up until then, but all of a sudden it was like, yeah, everything you just did, you get 3 different colors. Pick and choose.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, right.
So like, I think that in that way, like just restricting player choice enhances the gaming experience. It's almost like could you imagine if Devil May Cry, like Nero could do everything Dante could, and Dante could do everything that Nero could?
Yeah, right. That's true.
Like,
That's a good way to put it.
it makes very little like narrative sense, first of all, and also like it feels shallow as an experience. Like there's no depth to it at all. Like yeah, Mass Effect Andromeda is really fun to play, but overall you're kind of like, well, I mean, like if I just need to do something, I'll just switch to this class, and like you just feel like a Mary Sue. And I know like
Yeah.
when you're playing a game, feeling like a Mary Sue is not bad. Like as opposed to writing a Mary Sue, but like even then, like I feel like it cheapens the experience because you're not really earning a whole bunch with what your limited skill set gives you. You're just kind of like, well, I can just do everything, so I'll just do everything.
Oh
And
yeah, no, for sure, man.
yeah,
Well, it's like I we talked a little bit about difficulty last time, and the give and take of that is like inflated difficulty. I don't love the idea that you know like Assassin's Creed is basically the most specific example I've been coming off of recently, where the difference between easy mode and hard mode and stuff like that is
More
just
health.
numbers. Yeah, right. Literally nothing else in terms of a design change than very kind of obsolete or ambivalent effects. It's kind of like why it's related to me anyway. Like in Battlefield 5, I hate the TTK because it just doesn't feel good, right? It feels weird that you spend that many bullets to kill something, especially in the context of like human beings.
Yeah.
It's like forgivable somehow in Gears of War and Halo, where brutes are bullet sponges. Like, yeah, well, no shit. The Flood is they're necromorphs. That
Yeah.
I
And
can
you have
understand why.
and you have shields. So
Yeah, you're right. It's like it's the suspension of disbelief isn't like ruined on me, but when I'm playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey and you're literally just beating the ever living shit out of like a bear or something, and it's the only reason it's not doing any damage is because it just magically happens to be level 17 and you're level 12, and that's the restriction. It just feels like bullshit to me.
I think
But
The Witcher suffers from that sometimes too. Where like
yeah, same
I
thing.
fought a
Yeah,
hag that was level
yeah, yeah, I
40
know.
and I was level 10, and skill
Yeah, and
wise I was
it's
like fine. I was keeping up with her. However, she won just because I spent literally 15 minutes hitting her face,
yeah, I
and
know,
she
right?
didn't die. I was like, okay, well,
Seriously.
this seems a bit silly. Like,
Yeah, exactly,
and
dude.
it's like almost like the Division 2, which we've played a little bit of, just
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
background game. Not amazing, but like just good to play as like whatever. I'm not really focusing on it, kind of thing.
It's enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it still makes me angry no matter what, because it's like, oh man, I just unloaded an entire magazine into this man's face and he's still standing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's a weird. It's so funny how that.
And like there's some
Yeah,
enemies where it's like, oh, they have quote unquote body armor. It's like if a man with a face mask that's ballistic shielded takes a full magazine to his face,
yeah, dude.
he's
Exactly. Like
he's gonna have like probably his brain is gonna be jelly at that
I
point.
know, right? Yeah.
Like, and B, like he's gonna be incapacitated at the very least. And it's like, to me, it's just kind of like, I know video games aren't designed for realism. They shouldn't be because it's a video game at times. But when you have like such an uncanny world similar to your own, you're just kind of
Yeah.
like, why?
Yeah. Seriously. Well, yeah, that's what I mean. It's like context. Why wouldn't you make a different design choice? It's like I I want to be, in the same way that most people are pretty like lenient when it comes to suspension of disbelief, especially when it comes to video games. Like video games get away with fucking murder, like
Yeah,
on the writing front, on the realism front, and like that's not necessarily a big complaint, but when you're playing the division and like you said, you're pumping 30-06 into a guy's face, and it's like, oh, he's just got the gold armor, it's just that's why he can just take it.
it's like, yeah,
It does
and the
ruin the
shields.
immersion for sure.
I think like part of it's like I've been playing a lot of Monster Hunter.
Oh
That's
yeah,
where
dude.
I've gone through most of World at this point. I'm just waiting for the updates to come out. This really, and I jumped into Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, which is the older style. And I think
Yeah, you're saying
like
that.
what Monster Hunter does really well with its difficulty is that yes, you'll fight the same monster and at higher difficulties along with new ones, which again always adds to variety and like what you want to choose to fight and everything like that. But it also gives the monsters new moves and behaviors.
Yeah, okay.
Fighting a Rathian in low rank as compared to high rank and like master rank or G rank, entirely different experiences because there's a different cycle of their moveset they go through now because they have that one extra added mood, and also they have like side effects to them. Like I think in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, there's like a slight wind effect around a Rathian when you're fighting them, and like it can like stagger you as you're fighting them. And I think that makes your mind
Oh,
operate in different ways as
yeah,
you go
yeah,
through
sure.
all of it. And then it's in that way, I think the difficulty should be increased. Again, difficulty should be just more player options in the end,
Yeah,
pretty much. Like like Dark Souls, I feel like offers a ton of choice of what you can do. Like yes, there's a meta of like what's the best thing, but technically you can be good at everything and get through the game in different ways, right? Or am I wrong?
yeah. Well, they have. I mean, there's a couple like soft caps. I would say help to like um what do you call it? Like limit your overpoweredness. Like so, you do have ostensibly the opportunity to like really buff yourself to be super strong in certain ways. But at the same time, if I put, after about level like 120, for example, it stops being effective at all. It's like I don't get nearly as much buff. It's kind of like a proportional buffing,
Okay.
which is which is a good thing because it's like basically if I dump the first 120 levels into dexterity, I can't just go at 120 be like, oh well, now I'm going to start dumping them into intelligence or into like faith, which is like what you'd need to be a different kind of build, and that just is going to make a huge difference. It kind of just what do you call it? Yeah, I guess like again, it's just a soft cap. It just prevents you from like being crazy overpowered.
I think I've heard the reason that like Dark Souls 2 is considered a black sheep and not very good in comparison to the rest of the franchise, it actually eliminates that soft cap, doesn't it? Like there's a lot of things you can do in that game that just make it
I
like really easy. Like
I yeah, I haven't necessarily heard that as a major criticism because I haven't completed Dark Souls 2. And this is not uncommon for like Souls fans where Dark Souls 2 is the black sheep, and it's my frustration with Dark Souls 2 is not really about anything more than just a lot of like the design flaws. And people love to be apologists about Dark Souls 2 all the time, but it totally feels like a different game,
dude,
and the level design is
yeah,
not like on par, and
yeah.
it's just like it's just
Mechanically, it's not as sound either. Like I
yeah.
in my when I was playing Monster Hunter, I like to have something on in the background, and somehow my recommendations played a like 8-part series of why Dark Souls 2 is a terrible game, and it was like an 8-hour journey where I was like, "What?" I just got
Yeah.
exposed to a bunch of like lingo, and I was like, well, "I don't even know what you mean half the time," but I can see this is actually not like very terribly like this is terribly designed, and that like
Well, I mean,
it's
there were
cheap.
strengths. Yeah, like it wasn't. It had a really great PvP. Like the PvP community really liked Dark Souls 2 because there was a lot of opportunities to.
Do that easier. Like the online was better than Dark Souls 1 in that aspect, I think.
Yeah, right. But I also think Dark Souls 3 had a great PvP scene too. So it's not like
Well, Dark Souls 3 is pretty much like like just refines Dark Souls 1's formula because it's again it's Miyazaki who's directing Dark Souls 3 again, right?
Yeah, right. And I still think.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
I think the like again like also we're going to, if we're keeping on track with player options, going back to Dark Souls 2 real quick, like the
Yeah.
life stone as a healing system, like
Oh my God!
that
Fuck
was
that
like
noise,
yeah that was
dude.
I heard that just broke the game because it was so easy to get those.
Well, it's not. It
Like I think I saw a
it was
video.
just annoying. It wasn't like the in the same way that Bloodborne has blood vials as its healing thing, right? I'm not saying that I hate or like I hated the blood vials in Bloodborne. Don't get me wrong, but I at least understood them because in terms of lore, they make sense. Like the idea is that I don't know. It's kind of like the way they layer the mechanics in Bloodborne. The idea is that your character is supposed to be craving blood and so the idea is that every time he takes a heal, that's like taking a shot, and it's just and so you get more blood vials than you ever know what to do with, and it ends up being fine. You don't really even have to grind for them that hard. Like
True.
you can buy them, with
But
the
you're
dual
also
soul.
like I think you're limited in how many you can carry at one time, right?
Right, you can only carry
See,
20, and
that's the kicker there with Dark Souls 2, and that one dude like was just saying like just playing the game normally without trying to exploit this at all. He ended up with like 99 life stones by like 3 hours into the game, and he was like, "I can't
well,
die at this point."
well,
Like,
it's like the idea is, I mean, but that's the thing. The life stones essentially do the same thing that the blood vials do, but the problem is the life stones. They when you take it, it's like how you when you drink water in The Witcher, where your health will come back slowly.
yeah,
Does that make sense? So it's not, and so it's just annoying as shit. And the idea is that like it's needless. Especially the whole point, like Dark Souls feels good to play because there isn't as huge a cost of dying all the time because hey, at least you still have your healing item never runs out. Like you don't feel guilty using your healing item, but every other item in the game you somehow feel guilty using. Like Sekiro suffers from this megaton because so you have spirit emblems, which are like what it costs to use your tools in Sekiro, and they're limited. You literally don't there that's a limited commodity in the same way that life stones and blood echoes or blood vials are. in Sekiro, but you get so many of them that it never becomes a problem. But every other item that you get, even if it's valuable, has is limited. And if you don't know when you're ever going to get another one, like
You never
some of
know
the
when
most
they'll spawn.
valuable, yeah, right, dude. It's like I remember the one of my biggest criticisms of Sekiro is that like there's so many shinies all over the world, just like in Dark Souls or Bloodborne, but the items you're like risking your nuts to get to go get aren't worth jack shit. You know, it's like I remember getting killed just to get to an item one time, and it's like you pick it up and it's a fistful of ash.
Ooh.
You know, and you're like, dude, or like a ceramic shard. Every other item is a ceramic shard. Literally, is like picking up a rock in Far Cry. You know how you can like throw rocks in like stealth games sometimes to
Oh
like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
literally what a ceramic shard does. You know, so it's like it's just not like I that's that that doesn't feel good. Like that doesn't contribute any to my flow state. And if I get done with like my 80th try on a Bloodborne boss and it's like, oh shit, I just ran out of blood vials. Now I got to go farm them. Like that makes me want to. And Monster Hunter does the same thing. You know, it's like
Oh, with
you
the
accidentally.
ingredients and everything.
Yeah, right. So and I understand like the value in some sense, but Dark Souls 2 especially just took it to an annoying place. Like it was needless. You
Yeah,
had a
yeah. Like
great
I think just like the
system.
Estus flask is a well thought out like system
Yeah,
of healing. Just because like again, it's like you have 5 shots to heal yourself. So you learn to be more efficient with your healing, therefore getting just better at the game. And I think uh, with like the life stones, especially the fact that you can literally just farm for those when you run out, kind of like makes it to where, like, well, I mean, like I could get better at the game, or I could farm this one dude in this easy spot to get a bunch of souls, and then just buy me some
yeah,
more healing, so I have a bigger safety cushion. Which again is a player choice. You can choose not to do that in Dark Souls 2, but like that system itself lends itself to the rest of the design of the game, where they switched more to horde-like battles within the game. Because I was seeing some of the enemy like placement there, and I was like, "Oh man, that's like 20 dudes coming at you, a lot."
Oh, and Bloodborne,
No,
you talking about?
in Dark Souls 2.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think that's just
Right. Yeah, and that's part of the inflated difficulty where you're like, okay, you just copying and there's a thing in Sekiro that does it too where you know those like the mini bosses in Sekiro are pretty famous. Like you got the guys who are just have the big samurai swords who have 2 health bars and like when you kill them they go away forever, but and you get a prayer bead and so but like they're difficult, you know, but also they add to the levels and they make it dynamic and it's really fun. But at the end of the game in Sekiro, like right before you go into the last boss, there's one where it's literally 2 of these mini bosses at the same time. Right. It's and they're 2 of like one of them is famous because people don't do well with spears in that game. Or I don't know. I didn't I felt like with the Makiri counter where you know you like step on the spear like anime god that you are.
yeah.
um, like this, either the spear guys weren't that difficult, but anyway, so it's a spear guy and another guy at the same time. And like for a game that's all about your parrying and your kind of people say, oh, it's a it's a what do you call it? A music
It's a rhythm
it's
game.
a rhythm game, right? It's like for a rhythm game, you throwing 2 completely different rhythms theoretically, like at you at the same time, just to be like, yeah, dodge this bitch.
Like
It's like that.
like
That's not good game design,
I
man. That's
want you
just
to
like
punch to the beat of this dubstep mix, and
yeah,
it's like
right.
you're like
Yeah, right.
what?
But it's not even one dubstep song. It's literally, hey, I'm gonna play 2 dubstep songs at the same time, and you're just gonna have to deal with it.
Yeah,
Like I cheesed the shit out of that boss fight because it just felt so busted.
I got you.
You know.
And this, I think, well, I'm gonna take this more into the realms of like, I personally think that player choice and like difficulty balancing in that aspect, much easier in like tactical s games like turn-based RPGs and like tabletop games,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that
yeah.
like because your difficulty is not necessarily well, it can be a numbers game if you want it to be, but that just makes the game more boring and no one likes that. But like
Yeah,
in
yeah.
tactical RPGs, like, it's all about the enemy placement and enemy variety. Like what I do frequently in like Dungeons and Dragons, because I'm a nerd and I DM for people, is that for me difficulty is all about forcing you to use your resources. So I will have like archers set up on a higher position that snipe the party as they're attempting to fight guys on the ground. So if you're not focusing on them, you're gonna be chipped away in your health, and we gotta waste like spells to heal, items to heal, everything like that, and then
Yeah,
you also have to
yeah.
waste like resources to quickly kill the guys on the ground unless you have someone covering the top and things like that. And I think like just splitting your mind in those different avenues rather than I punch dude in front of me is like
Yeah,
another
right,
is
exactly.
another example of like how you can add more choices to the scenario and
Yeah,
let the
yeah, yeah.
player just do what they want. Of course, my party being new to D&D is always like I punch it. It's like, God, guys.
Well, that's literally you reminded me of the guy in Borderlands 2
Yeah.
when you get to the Brick, that's his name.
Yeah.
I just met him in Borderlands 3 at the
Brick.
Jacobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, he but yeah, you like fight your whole way with the dwarves, in
Yeah.
Borderlands 2, and you get to the Dwarf King, and it's like really nice, and it's like because it's a D&D thing, and he's like, I punch him like the king of the dwarves. You punch the king of the dwarves, and so you have to fight your way out of Moria
Yeah.
essentially because you
It's like,
picked a fight.
God.
Oh my god,
Yeah, and it's like,
perfect.
yeah, I had like a thing where like I'm like leading them on to like interrogating a prisoner. Well, they have two prisoners, and literally the guy who's about to interrogate them is always like he says to them, "It's like, listen, we got to be subtle about this. I may be a bandit, quote unquote, but I am not like violent. I don't want to be like that kind of guy with this." And one of the players takes that as like, "Oh yeah, okay, I'm with you, man. All right." And then he's a dragon. He's a half dragon, so he just picks up a dude with his tail, right? And
Half dragon
yeah, I had to make that race up and stuff
as
like that.
opposed to a full dragon.
No, he's
Um,
half mast at all times. No, but
God.
no, he picks up the dude with his tail and like begins just slamming him into the ground. I'm like, my man. It's like, I know you have infinite choices, but why'd you go with that one?
Yeah, I know,
It's
right?
like, how do you know like how information comes out? Like the man's foaming at the mouth, he's probably dying, and now
It's
his
like,
friend's cowering in fear. So maybe he'll give something, but geez, man. And
jeez
yeah, I
Louise,
think that
dude.
also plays in like when you have that much player choice, you gotta be able to deal with the consequences in a way
Yeah,
like speed running in that aspect where people would discover options they didn't have previously through sheer like breaking the game. And
yeah,
like
yeah, right.
speedrunning is all about not playing the game as it was intended. It's about
Yeah,
basically
exactly. The
finding a
meta,
way.
literally. Yeah,
Yeah, how do you cheese this as quickly as possible? Even I have to hump this wall 14 times to make it to the last boss.
yeah, I know, right?
They will do that, and it's like, all right, that's cool. I enjoy watching that just because like, yeah, it's game breaking, but like it's not like something that's easily replicable. And
Hmm.
like in that way, like it rewards the really skilled or really like detail oriented players to do that. I don't think, and
Yeah,
yeah,
no, for sure.
and like in that aspect, like player choice always needs to be rewarding. Like the thing with Sekiro you were talking about, where you go down this path, fight all these really difficult enemies, just go down to this one body, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna get something good out of this. And it's like, here's a ceramic shard, guys, and it's like, dude,
Yeah, it's like,
why?
come on, man, come on.
Yeah, and like,
God.
yeah, like, I think player choice needs to have the appropriate consequence. Like, Witcher 3, I think, does that really well in terms of narrative choice. The Red
Yeah,
Baron's
right.
always a good example of that, where like no matter what you choose, there's consequences on every side. And
Oh,
even like
yeah,
with Kiera
definitely, dude.
Metz in your end, where she has many different outcomes depending on your own choices as well. And even like
Yeah.
this random quest I got when I was walking around, and I walked into a tower, and she's looking, and then the ghost in there is looking for her lover who either abandoned her or
Oh, yeah, dude. That's a great
dude,
quest. Yeah, that's.
that quest is creepy as hell. I feel like you just set her free. He goes to she like disappears, and you just walk to a house, and the house is broken into. There's blood everywhere,
Yeah.
and you're just like, oh, I did this. I did this. Like this is awful. Or you literally take the dude up to her, and she just kills him there anyways. But at least she doesn't
Yeah.
like ravage the town. I don't know if she attacks the town or something, but like yeah, like that game.
Yeah.
Every time you did something, I'm like, oh, did I do the right choice?
No, there are definitely some real repercussions that I appreciate. One of the big ones that I remember is like the Baron specifically will kill himself if you do, you know.
Spoilers, by the way.
y-
Yeah.
If you haven't played The Witcher 3 yet, fuck you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm only half joking.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, but no, for real though, it's like it's crazy to think like what kind of destructive. I even here's another example from The Witcher 3. Like in the opening kind of chapter where you're in Velen,
Yeah.
White Orchard, I think, is like the opening kind of area. And so uh, there's a bar fight, like classic. They do this in the show, which I thought was really important because like if there is one person who can find his way into a bar fight, it's motherfucking Geralt of Rivia.
Yeah.
That dude can find his way into a bar fight anytime, any place. And so I remember on my first playthrough, I was completely shocked because you're right about to meet Yen, Yennefer for the first time in the games because I don't think you meet Yen in the first game or the second game.
No, you
Like
hear
it's all
her.
talked about.
Yeah, she's talked about in the second game, not the first game, I think.
Yeah, right. I remember her. I don't think I ever actually played the first one, but I remember they talked about her a lot in the second game, but you never actually meet Triss as kind of the main femme fatale now. But
Yeah.
but anyway, so like it's literally I'm supposed to be I think the mission's called Lilac and Gooseberries, and my Geralt just because of like the I'm trying to play the good guy. I'm not. I really wasn't trying to get into like some fight, but at the same time, you kind of can tell when the game is almost like taunting you with violence. You know what I mean?
God, yeah.
Like in the same way that Mass Effect does it. But I just was I found myself literally chopping somebody's head off in the middle of this poor woman's bar.
Well, even like I think
Like
because they instigate the fight with you because like you go and pull a lady away from like another lady who's like the lady's crushing her head on the counter and it's like dude
yeah,
stop,
it's like
oh my god.
yeah, it's like Jesus, like knock it off, you weirdo.
And the bar patron is like, how dare you touch her? It's like, dude, do you have
Or
eyes? Like,
you too? Yeah.
and then like you're like, I don't want to kill them, and he draws his sword. You're like, I'm killing them.
Well, yeah, right. It's like I guess you just gotta live.
And then like even
Yeah,
when
dude.
Geralt goes to like tell the woman who was like 5 minutes ago crushing a woman's skull against like the counter, like he was telling her, I was like, I mean you no harm, and she's like, get away from me, you freak. And it's like, lady, are you
I guess I
aware
do.
of your own actions there? Like,
Yeah, I know, right? Now that I'm thinking about the show, I guess I do kind of appreciate that he like waxes Renfrey in such a hardcore kind of way. It's like, hey man, you drop a sword and it's open season. Like I don't fuck around. And it's like I obviously didn't expect him to actually kill. And I know like the according to the books like that's supposed to happen and
yeah.
stuff, but it still is kind of very I think true to form for like the way The Witcher goes
Well, it's like
because
everyone tells him to choose the lesser evil, but he fights for the greater good.
yeah, oh,
And
that's
I
a
think
good. Oh, that's
yeah,
a buttery way to put it.
that's what I think sums up Geralt overall. Like you don't think he's a white knight esque character who like tries to do good, but like he really is. It's very obvious.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, so like, they always like, yeah, choose the lesser of two evils. It's like, oh, are you stop?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, like, but like the show is very satisfying to watch. There are a few choices in there. I'm kind of like, that makes no sense. I mean, you could have just done
Oh no,
this,
dude.
but yeah,
I thought it had plenty of like its own issues, but at the same time, as far as fantasy shows go,
yeah,
it did exactly what I needed it to be into it.
yeah.
It's like I finished it and I am looking forward to season 2 a lot because I'm a
Well,
huge Witcher nerd.
mainly
But
because the timeline will probably be more coherent this time around
yeah, right,
because
right, and
because
they
the
have their
stories because they did all the short stories first, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's what they're doing first, and now they're going to do the same thing. But I think like every time Henry Cavill was on screen as Geralt, I was like, I'm in love.
I know,
Like
right? I
I
know.
want to watch this man play this character forever. Just give me more of this man.
I
But
know, man. Yeah,
and then he
seriously,
cuts to like
he's like
I
medieval Bond.
yeah like I didn't
Great.
mind Yennefer or I didn't like and Siri was kind of like stock like whatever kind of thing like
Yeah,
not,
right.
not a lot of theirs are gonna be like unique to her. My main issues with the Yennefer stuff is just that like the side characters around Yennefer were just like oh
I will say that I appreciate them like giving her origin service, like especially I don't
no,
towards the end, it was
her
like
origin and like how she interacts with the world is very interesting. It's
yeah, yeah.
everyone else around her that I just find either
Oh
great
yeah.
or boring.
Oh
Like,
my god. Yeah,
yeah,
no, for
but
sure.
meanwhile, like Geralt always has interesting antagonists coming after him, even though sometimes their decisions make zero sense. But like
Yeah.
they're interesting in how they deliver it, and he also has like more interesting side characters who talk to him and like interact with him as well. Like even the guy who's just trying to bury the dead at the final episode
Yeah.
is like he compels. He feels far more compelling than the usual snobby like mage man.
Yeah, true.
Like
No, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
because it's like this has been shown to be a very dark and dreary world, and here's this innocent old man just trying to bury the dead.
Yeah, no.
Like
Well, I did kind of appreciate like because we always go back to Star Wars,
yeah,
like the moral the one part where the noblewoman who takes in Siri, like she wants to take in Siri because she recognizes that she's like a noble and stuff like that, but at the same time she treats her like dwarven assistant like shit, right? And so what happens is when the emergency happens, literally like her the dwarf who is working for her, who she just treats like a second class citizen, who treats like shit, literally stabs her in the back and steals her fine silver, at the end because
not only stabs her in the back, but stabs her brutally multiple times.
yeah, right. I mean, and it's like at the same time, and I'm interested to see what you thought of that because at least like it's not perfect, it's subtle, it's like small kind of world building stuff, but you're like, at least that's actually true to form. You're like, dude,
Yeah.
that's like an actual measurable thing that
Well,
happens
again,
all over the
like
world.
the person, yeah, that's what happens, and like again, that resentment's always there. So it's very realistic, like human behavior.
Yeah,
What
right.
happens there? Like again, like you know, sometimes like racism is just a topic you can't really be subtle about. It's like it's hate for another person who looks different than you. It's like there's not
Right, right, right.
there's ways that you can't be very subtle about that, and like that way dealing it that way just makes sense to me. Like maybe I don't think it's super subtle because like it's not as in your face as like a lot of modern
Well,
TV shows can be
and,
about it. But like at
yeah,
the same
right.
time though, like it's gonna like be in your face because again she shows obvious disdain and like pompousness towards the dwarf. And if he just sat there and
Right.
didn't do anything, I'd be frustrated with him. I'm like,
Yeah,
dude.
exactly, exactly. Right. So, like the comparison to Star Wars, where you're like, okay, well, you're trying to make this moral moment out of, but you're also not giving it the psychological clarity that it needs. Like prejudice, the word prejudice comes from prejudgment, right? Like that's the denotation of the word, and that's a very simplistic human behavior, and it doesn't have to coincide with any one kind of prejudice, but it is like something you have to square with if you're making a political drama or some political statement, like you have to give it a credibility and a credence. Like you have to make a system, an infrastructure, a world where
That
where
truly
that
makes
makes sense.
sense.
Yeah, right, right.
Like,
And in The Witcher, I'm glad that the show wasn't afraid to get in the weeds and just to talk about it. Like and they didn't do it all the time. Like the elves was kind of a strange, interesting
yeah.
interaction that I think the books and the games do better probably than.
Yeah, because again, like sometimes the games handle like that kind of dynamic better because you have a choice in the matter
Oh yeah,
most of
that's
the
true.
time. So like you just feel more involved and more directly like addressing these issues rather than watching them play out. But I
And
think
they
like
do it better. Yeah, your options are more aligned with what the two sides of the coin are. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
what the if that makes sense.
yeah, like, again, like you're seeing it from both of their perspectives there, and you react to it there, and you
Yeah.
can react to it. Like in the show, you just watch what happens. But then I think like something when you especially when you show prejudice like that or like themes like that, they have to make sense within the world, as you were saying before. Like if we're gonna like just hop onto the Star Wars hate train, which I love to do.
Yeah, let's
It's my
hop on.
favorite vehicle. Like jump on it. but uh
Yeah.
like if we talk about the Last Jedi and how like one of the big plot points of Canto Bight and that useless plot line was like, look how these rich people are bad because they use child slaves. Number one, why are they using child slaves? Like it's a wholly inefficient process. They're child slaves. They're gonna mess up a whole bunch. You have to feed them. You have to shelter
Yeah,
them.
right, right.
You could have just made
Yeah.
droids.
Yeah,
Like
it's like people who are evil for using chemical weapons. Like, the reason we don't use chemical weapons is because they're unpredictable.
yeah,
It's like like the nukes are still in the arsenal. The chemical weapons aren't because chemical weapons are hard to control.
like
Not a moral alignment there. But
yeah.
anyway, I don't
It's
know if
just
that's
like but yeah,
fair.
it's just like things like that where it's like this makes no sense within the world because droids have already been established as subservient. Unless we're gonna take
Yeah,
solo into account as like, oh yeah,
I
okay, I
didn't
guess
even
they're
think
one of the
about it. Yeah,
finest. But yeah, like,
that's such a funny
yeah,
example.
and it's like such a thing. Like, look how evil they are. They have child slaves. My mind would be like, they're actually evil and stupid because they have child slaves.
Yeah, they're evil and stupid. Yeah, that's the best.
And like, they waste time in that whole thing freeing animals, and like setting them off into the wild when they don't realize that domesticated animals that are set off into the wild don't just become wild.
Yeah, I know, right?
Like number one, they have advanced machinery. Those animals will be captured again. Number two, you've destroyed that entire thing that those rich people don't have to collect on.
Greer,
Like,
you forgot they rode those animals on the side of the Death Star, off the side of the Star
no,
Destroyer.
it wasn't those animals. It was the
It wasn't?
no, it was different horses. Those horses were
Whatever,
on.
dude.
Yeah, they went to Endor, and where there were special breeds of Endor horses, and took
Special
those with
breeds.
them and rode them on the side of the Star Destroyer. That could have literally just turned to the right and tipped all of them off the side, but I digress. But it's
Hey,
just
dude.
it's like that. Everything within Star Wars there, like especially within the sequels, just doesn't make any sense whatsoever as a world. And like when you try to address serious themes through that lens, you can't take anything seriously because nothing makes sense within this world. Like it breaks continuity, and you're like, this makes no sense because
Well, yeah,
yes,
right, because
yes,
it's like,
humans can be evil, but
yeah.
humans that are evil are also a lot of times rational. Like
Right. No, that's what I mean. Yeah, it's like the world building. You're not you're so focused on the theme that you're forgetting the architecture that is required to build and to make the theme believable. Right. It's like,
yeah,
and that's it comes back to that same suspension or subversion of expectations type thing.
yeah,
Like the only way you get away with subverting expectations is if it falls within the parameters of the categories that you've set out from the beginning that you've built for this for like your expositional moment, and that you can't, like, you got to be able to square those things. Like there has to be inherent logic that transcends the whole thing, otherwise it just is never going to play. And I don't appreciate some ham-fisted defense of that when it's like you have examples of where that works, like again with The Witcher.
yeah. Again, like
Uh,
if it makes sense within the world, I will accept it. It's like you don't pull me out of the story to tell me your personal views on like what like racism, how racism should be addressed. Like I understand it's bad. I'm not saying it's good. I just want to make sense within the story I'm watching. Like
yeah, right, right,
yeah,
right.
like I understand that's fine, but like just kind of uh like it's things like that play into almost uh like if you want to have payoff, you need to have effort into it. We're gonna break into a whole different tangent if we go down that rabbit hole where like everything today is payoffs, no build up, and
Oh yeah,
that makes me
that's
just
fair.
angry all around. But
Yeah, dude.
but I think just trying to tie it back into player choice. Like if you give
Oh yeah.
the player a ton of choices with no effort put behind said choices, they're not gonna care. Like no one's gonna care if you went left or right if it ends up in the same place anyways. Like just kind of like
Yeah, yeah,
in that
fair.
aspect, like every choice a player needs to make, or like or a reader for that matter, if there's like a choose your own adventure, something thing like that, needs to have enough different outcomes that they feel like their choice made a difference in the end. And kind of like that, those moralistic choices are really good avenues to do that. And I think The Witcher especially handles that extremely well. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, and then like we can go on about gameplay systems and everything like that, and explore the intricacies of that. And I could, but that'd be just me talking about D&D for an extra 2 hours, and I'm sure people would fall asleep.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of D&D, what do you think about Baldur's Gate gameplay, Bro
It
Beans?
looks like D&D 5, like 5th edition. Well, I mean, from the little I saw like 2 minutes, and I was like, okay, I'm not gonna spoil this for myself. And I saw like they had a bonus action, an action, and I think maybe a reaction later. But there's also like they had that. It looked a lot like Divinity 2, graphics wise and UI wise.
Is it made by the same people?
It is, but like again, if it's Baldur's Gate, it should feel like Baldur's Gate, not like Divinity 2. Here's a mod.
Yeah, yeah, that's
And
fair.
like, you know, I understand it's super pre-alpha, so they're probably not like done adjusting the UI and everything like that. They probably just use the Divinity 2 engine as a good like reference point for them to like, implement systems. And I think personally that Divinity itself is a good like just framework or engine to build off of because it allowed for a lot of out of the box thinking within battles. And
Yeah.
D&D loves doing that. Like I think a dude killed a brain that was walking towards him by throwing his boots at it. Like, okay,
Really?
you couldn't do that in The Witcher, but you can do that in D&D.
Yeah. Or electrocute people with their own blood. You
Yeah,
know,
like that kind of things,
it's
like
like
where
I guess I can appreciate that.
that kind of like just allowance for chaos like that to happen is very D&D esque.
Yeah, that's fair.
I just want them to make the game feel more like Baldur's Gate, not Divinity Baldur's Gate edition,
Yeah, that's fair.
like that. And yeah,
I guess. Yeah, I guess like I don't want to be. I want to be receptive to what. I get that it's my problem that I don't like turn based. Like I know that, but
loser.
at the same time, like I would love to appreciate throwing boots, like the dynamism of throwing boots at an enemy and being able to kill them. But like
Well, I
when
think
it's turn based and the way it's organized, it feels so slow and weird. It doesn't feel like I don't know. I don't know. It's just
well,
not a
I think a big part of that is that it's playing D&D for you without a DM, and the DM in
yeah,
D&D
yeah.
can make
That's
or
fair.
break a game. Like for me, when I'm playing D&D, uh, the guy who's like being dungeon master for me and a buddy, where we do like a 2-man campaign. Most of the time, we're not even in combat. Most of the time, we're just talking shit to everything we come
Yeah,
across, and that kind of like we're not relying on the combat system itself to play the game. We're instead relying on how our characters are made background wise to like
yeah,
have different interactions, and that's more like our choice to do that. I understand some people play it as a war game where they want to be like more combat simulation type esque stuff, and that's
yeah,
fine. Like that's fun too if you can figure out some cool synergies with classes. It's totally cool. But I think like with Divinity at least, it's just the system automating everything. Like you have a like you hit attack, the dude walks up, he swings his weapon. You're not gonna have a narrator who's like when you choose to swing your weapon, it's like you swing your weapon, but when as you miss, he like twists his body,
yeah, yeah. That's
deflects the
fair.
sword, throws it to the side, and counters with his own attack as he like it moves into his turn, and you can describe that. It feels a lot less dynamic when you don't have someone describing all the actions like
Yeah,
a
right.
reader does.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true. Yeah,
and then like like playing D&D in person with like on the tabletop just feels way more dynamic than playing it on computer. And I think
yeah.
that's a lot
No,
where the
that's fair.
disconnect is sometimes when I play like Divinity and
Sure.
stuff like that. Where I'm like, man, if I was running this campaign, I would be making this look a lot more epic because I go ridiculous in my like scene description when battles going down.
Well, and honestly, that's what I mean. I'm just bitter about it because, like, we talked a lot about where I get my role playing like values from,
Yeah,
and part of the reason that Warhammer is just absolutely scratching that itch for me is because you have the big map board that feels like a board game. It feels like it's simulating a lot of what the jollies you get from like sitting around a table and playing a game like Risk or
yeah,
Settlers of Catan or something like that. But then at the same time, when you can go into a battle and literally fight it in a strategic way, and so it just adds like unlimited potential for me to build the world around, the legendary lord I'm playing, or like the whole story I just told you about the elves and
yeah.
shit. That's all this dynamic storytelling that I'm helping myself with, and that and like it feels like in the same way that Warhammer, the actual board game, the with the figures and the models and stuff like that is part. I think it helps your immersion, it helps your imagination, and helps build your imagination. Like that's the type of thing I want a game that'll kind of inject that imaginative.
Oh yeah, like I think Warhammer is really good about that too because it has the backdrop of war, which is a dynamic combat in itself. Like
Yeah, yeah,
it's
that's
not like
fair.
Divinity where again everything's playing out like almost like a grid, and
Yeah, yeah, I
you
get
move
that.
robotically to your position. And you get here and you do this, you do your action, you wait, and everything like that, and it feels very like you know in like the tabletop setting, it feels organic because like it allows you to process things quicker. But as a video game, you're like, huh, wait, block, huh, wait, block, huh, like, and it's like it feels very like robotic in that aspect. And you could make that better if you just like make everything more real time esque, like the old Baldur's Gate games did, where everything ran in real time and you had to pause on your own if you want to make a decision to change the outcome. And I think
Yeah,
like Warhammer does that really well, where it's just that on a super massive scale, where you have units and like different factions of your army doing different things, making different decisions based on like the terrain, how the battle is going, and all that stuff. And I think it allows
yeah,
again,
yeah,
it's more options, but more meaningful options. It's not like I choose to have their feathers green because I like green. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
that's
true.
nice, I guess, but like it doesn't make a huge difference in terms of impact on the game itself. And I think for you at least, like that with Warhammer, especially with the Skaven, like where you're just playing the artillery build and you just lay waste to them from a distance. It's highly effective for you because again, it has a dynamic feel to it
Yeah,
overall.
yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah, and just I feel like Baldur's Gate 3 needs to have that sort of thing to it. Like you can do ridiculous things, and the world does react to them, but it feels like very like instanced between each turn, and I just need that to like pick it up a little bit faster. And it probably will,
Yeah,
but they're all
yeah,
level. They're
yeah.
all level 1, which is like the most boring combat you could ever think of.
Yeah, I'm hoping that. Yeah, and honestly, it's like if you showed real trajectory and like in that sort of way, like improvement and like if the end game combat looked substantially different than the early game combat, then I could totally see I can see the value in that. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
like a
It
level
just
1
depends.
fighter for if we're using like metrics. A level 1 fighter, all he can do in his turn is swing once. There you go.
Yeah,
He swung
yeah,
once. Good job. Level 20 fighter,
killed it.
depending on his subclass too, can swing 4 times. Action surge, meaning he gets another action. Swing another 4 times. So that's 8 times total with just his weapon. And if he has a special item or something as a bonus action, he can also use his bonus action to create another effect that changes terrain, switches up someone's things. And if he's like a battle master as well, he can add maneuvers to his own attacks, which he has 8 of. And he can do different effects with set attacks that like cause the enemy to react in different ways. And it's like you get more options to do things as you level up. And sometimes I
Mm.
think D&D's weakness in design, especially with the 5th edition, is that you actually don't feel like a distinctive character in combat until you're level 3. And depending on your DM,
Mm.
that could take ages to get to. Like,
Yeah.
for the campaign I'm playing in right now, it's taken us 3 months to get to level 3.
What?
And it's just been like, uh, well, we've played once a week for like a month, and then we've been on and off. So that's kind of why. But at the same
That
time,
is still
I'm
inexcusable.
like every time we're in combat, it's like if I was just level 3, I could use my magic. Right now, all I got is a sword. I just poke people and I shield up. I feel like I'm in early Dark Souls right now.
Yeah, dude. Oh my
But
god.
yeah, and I think that like because especially like uh, depending on your class, like you can either have the time of your life from levels 1 to 5, or the real game starts at level 3. So like if I DM, if they're not beginners, I'm like we're starting at level 3 just because I know you guys don't want to sit around and just poke things.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Like you want to fight boars in the freaking forest for like 3 days, do you?
Yeah, I'm reminded of the World of Warcraft episode from
Yeah, yeah, from South Park.
South Park. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So funny.
and I think it's like that where like your player choice like doesn't really open up until you hit a certain threshold in D&D, and it's probably what puts off a lot of people honestly when they get into it. And granted, the game the D&D is growing exponentially as time goes on, even today. But like sometimes like I realize that like I try to get some people into it, and like you're level 1, what can you do? Well, I can do this one thing, and that's all I can do for the next like 2 levels, and immediately you're kind of like,
So,
eh.
so do you ever start people at level 3 like off the bat, or I mean, do you have like a way to
I've done
prevent
a
that
few
kind of?
one shots where I'm like, yeah, everyone's level 5 or everyone's level 7, and like if I'm
Gotcha.
feeling frisky, like everyone's level 11. Let's see, let's just pure chaos. Let's see what happens. Because like when you hit level 15, you're basically a demigod. Like at that point, you would have amassed a magic item arsenal for almost every situation, and your abilities alone, especially if you're a spellcaster, can make you alter reality itself. If you're a
Oh,
fighter, you can just punch things
jeez.
really well. But like, if you're a wizard, you're like, I can literally like send you to a different plane of existence, and if I hold the spell long enough, you're banished forever.
God.
Yeah, and it's like there we go. Like that's how you have to deal with the situation. And for me, like being a DM is almost like a dream for me because I have the most options, and every option I make is to the detriment of the players. Or boon. Like
Yeah.
I'm not always an asshole, but like in that aspect, I'm like everything I do has a meaning, and I will abuse that to so much heights. I think
Yeah, I feel like I should
yeah.
honestly just because I feel like I'd have a knack for being a troll of a dungeon master.
Like
Get into it for that alone.
you master the rules and then it's like jumping into your campaign. It's like, here you are. Prepare to get fucked. It's like, oh come on.
God, dude.
Yeah, and it's just like I think I would like more games to have that kind of like choice interaction where everything you do has a meaningful impact on what you're doing. Like I don't want to be like stuck in a simulator where you're just walking in a straight line for 30 minutes to get some other place to deliver this item so you can walk back to the place and tell them you delivered the item. Like back in the olden days of like fetch quests.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like games nowadays actually overall have been allowing more choice like that. I just we're in the shallow era of it where like the choices that are included feel like either A they should have been there to begin with because before you get those you feel like a robot, or B like they're so non impactful that you don't even recognize it. Like the Division 2 has so many perks that when I get them, I forgot I got them. Because like it
I
has
know. Yeah,
zero
exactly.
influence in the actual gameplay itself. I was like, you do 2% more damage. Like, thanks, game. That means nothing.
Oh God. Well, yeah, right. That that just kills me. That's when it's like the least fun when you're just looking at spreadsheets,
Yeah,
basically.
when progression doesn't feel fun, a game gets boring. And like, I think
Yeah.
like D&D up until level 3 at least is not very good in that aspect. When you hit level 3 though, it is just a snowball of things you can do. So, I
Oh
love
yeah,
it.
dude.
So, yeah, that's why I'm a tabletop nerd, guys. So,
That's
yeah.
it, man. That's why.
Yeah. All right. I think we've exhausted everything for today, though. So, is there anything you want to say, Matt?
Play Total War Warhammer 2. It's really good, and long live the Skaven.
Nice. All right. See you guys next time. Stay safe out there. Goodbye.
Stay breezy.